All right, so uh, have you ever, like, looked up at the night sky and thought about humans living on Mars?
Oh, absolutely.
Not just, visiting for a quick trip,
Right.
but actually, like, living there,
Yeah.
building cities, maybe even, like, farms and stuff.
It's incredible to think about.
It sounds like straight out of science fiction, right?
Yeah.
But that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Really?
Yeah, could we actually terraform Mars?
Oh, wow.
Like, transform it to actually support human life?
That's a question that's been around for a while. People have been scientists and just, you know,
Sci-fi fans?
yeah, sci-fi fans have been thinking about this for a long time.
For sure.
But what's really cool is that it's not just a fantasy anymore.
Really?
Like our sources actually go into the steps involved and
Okay.
like the challenges we'd face if we tried to do this.
I'm already hooked.
It's really
I've
fascinating.
I've seen that our sources lay out a 4-step plan for this whole thing.
Wow, a 4-step plan.
Yeah, and it starts with like building a whole atmosphere from scratch.
That's ambitious.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, uh, maybe you can give us an idea of what Mars is like right now.
Okay, sure.
Like, why can't we just pack our bags and move in?
Well, okay, so first of all, Mars has this incredibly thin atmosphere.
Okay.
Like, it's about 100 times thinner than Earth's.
Wow, 100 times.
Yeah, and it's mostly carbon dioxide.
Oh, right. So not very breathable.
Not ideal for us, no.
Okay, so no strolling around without a spacesuit.
Probably not a good idea.
But aside from that, like, how big of a problem is that thin atmosphere really?
Oh, it's a big problem.
Like, even if we could figure out the breathing situation,
All right.
what else is stopping us?
No, that thin atmosphere has some pretty major consequences.
Okay.
Like, it's not dense enough to protect us from the sun's radiation.
Yeah, that's not.
Yeah, it's a really serious health hazard.
Oh, okay.
Plus, it can't trap enough heat to keep water in liquid form. Yeah, so any water would either freeze into ice or like evaporate into space. Basically, Mars is pretty hostile to humans right now.
All right, so step 1 on our terraforming to-do list.
Okay.
Make a thicker atmosphere.
It's a thicker atmosphere, got it.
And our sources mentioned releasing greenhouse gases,
Okay.
both ones already trapped on Mars and some imported from Earth.
Wow.
How would that work exactly?
So the idea is that greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide,
Mm-hmm.
they act like a blanket, kind of.
Okay.
They trap heat from the sun and warm the planet.
Oh, I see.
So by releasing more of them into the Martian atmosphere,
Okay.
we could potentially start a warming effect that would begin to transform the planet.
Interesting. So we just pump Mars full of these greenhouse gases and voila.
It's not quite that simple.
Okay.
I'm afraid it's more like a chain reaction
Okay.
that we have to carefully orchestrate.
I see.
The thicker atmosphere and warmer temperatures would then help with the next step, melting the ice caps.
Oh, right. The ice caps. Tell me about those. Are we talking like tiny glaciers?
No, these are, they're vast.
Right.
They're at the poles of Mars,
Oh, great.
and they're made up of frozen water and carbon dioxide.
Wow. Frozen carbon dioxide, huh?
Yeah, and they hold a ton of potential for terraforming.
Essential in what way?
Well, melting these ice caps would release even more carbon dioxide and water vapor into the atmosphere.
So even more greenhouse gases then.
Exactly.
Okay.
Which would further thicken it and speed up the warming process.
Okay, I see. So it's kind of like a planetary domino effect.
Kind of, yeah.
But how do we actually go about melting these massive ice caps?
Well, the sources mention some pretty interesting methods.
Like
One idea is to use giant orbital mirrors.
giant mirrors.
Yeah, to reflect sunlight onto the ice caps.
Like from space?
Yeah, like massive mirrors in space, redirecting sunlight.
That's very futuristic.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Anything else?
Another more controversial suggestion is to use nuclear detonations to kickstart the melting.
Hold on. Nuclear explosions on Mars.
Yeah, it's a very drastic measure,
No kidding.
and it could be pretty risky.
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, we're talking about manipulating a whole planet here.
It's mind-blowing to even think about.
It's a huge undertaking.
So, okay, let's say we manage to thicken the atmosphere, melt the ice caps.
You're right.
What happens next?
Well, that's when things start to get really exciting.
Okay, I like exciting. What happens?
As the ice melts and the planet warms, you'd start to see liquid water flowing on Mars.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, it's possible that old dried up riverbeds would fill with water.
Wow.
lakes would form.
That's amazing.
And maybe even oceans.
Oceans on Mars.
That's a possibility.
That's a sight I'd love to see.
It'd be incredible.
But why is liquid water so important for this whole terraforming thing?
Well, I mean, aside from the fact that we need it to drink,
Right, of course.
it also plays a huge role in regulating climate.
Oh, yeah, how so?
Well, think about the oceans on Earth.
Okay.
They act as giant heat sinks,
Yeah.
they moderate temperatures and keep the weather stable.
So oceans on Mars could help make the climate more Earth-like.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So we're on our way to a second home for humanity then.
Well,
There's got to be a catch, right?
there are always challenges, yeah.
Like what?
Well, one of the biggest ones is that Mars doesn't have a strong magnetic field.
Oh, right. Like Earth has.
Exactly, like Earth has.
I remember learning about that in school. It's like a shield, right?
Yeah, it protects us from...
It protects us from something.
It deflects most of the charged particles from the sun.
Oh, right. The solar wind.
Yeah, the solar wind. And without it, our atmosphere would just get stripped away over time.
So Mars is like constantly getting blasted by the sun.
Yeah, kind of.
And that's a problem for terraforming.
It's a big problem.
How so?
Because even if we managed to make the atmosphere thicker,
Right.
it could just get eroded away again by the solar wind.
Oh, so we'd be fighting a losing battle.
We might be, yeah.
Okay, that's a little discouraging.
It's definitely a challenge.
It sounds like terraforming isn't just about building a new atmosphere. It's about protecting it too.
Exactly.
And our sources didn't really go into how to solve that magnetic field problem, did they?
They mention a few theoretical ideas, but nothing concrete.
Like what?
Well, some scientists have proposed creating an artificial magnetic field.
An artificial one.
Yeah, maybe using satellites,
Mm-hmm.
or even like a giant superconducting ring around Mars.
A giant ring.
Yeah, but these ideas are still very speculative.
It sounds like we're getting into some serious science fiction territory now.
A little bit, yeah.
But it's really cool to see how these challenges are like pushing the boundaries of what we can even imagine.
Oh, for sure.
Even if we never actually terraform Mars, the ideas themselves are fascinating.
Absolutely. It's pushing the limits of science and technology.
Yeah, it really is. So let's assume for a moment that we can overcome these challenges.
Okay.
We've got a thicker atmosphere. We've got liquid water flowing on the surface.
All right.
What's the final step in making Mars truly habitable?
The final piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Introducing life.
Life. Okay.
We'd need to create an ecosystem that can generate oxygen
Right.
and support plants and animals.
So we're talking about more than just like planting some trees and hoping for the best.
Oh, yeah, it's much more complex than that. It
Yeah.
would probably involve like multiple stages,
Okay.
starting with introducing microorganisms
Okay.
like bacteria and algae.
Oh.
They could survive the harsh conditions and start converting carbon dioxide into oxygen.
Through photosynthesis.
Exactly,
Yeah.
through photosynthesis.
So starting with the smallest building blocks of life.
Right.
And then working our way up.
Yeah, over time, as the atmosphere gets more oxygen and the environment stabilizes, we could introduce plants, then maybe animals, and eventually a whole Martian ecosystem.
It's incredible to imagine, but how long would all of this take?
We're talking a very long time.
Like years, decades.
More like thousands or even millions of years.
Wow, millions of years.
Yeah, it's a reminder that terraforming Mars wouldn't be a quick fix.
It'd be like a multi-generational project.
Exactly, a legacy passed down through generations.
That's really something to think about.
It really is.
I mean, it makes you think about the impact of our actions, you know,
For sure.
like way beyond our own lifetimes.
Yeah.
It's a huge responsibility.
It is.
It's an incredible concept, but it raises some big questions too, right?
Absolutely.
Like, I mean, do we even have the right to terraform another planet?
That's a big one.
What about the possibility of life already existing on Mars?
Right. Even if it's just microbial life.
Yeah.
Those are crucial questions.
They really are.
And luckily, our sources delve into those too.
I'm definitely interested to hear more about that.
We'll get into that.
It seems like this whole terraforming idea really makes us think about our place in the universe.
Yeah, it does.
You know, like it's a much bigger question than just how do we do it?
It really is.
It's also about should we do it?
Right. And what are the implications?
Exactly.
It's a huge philosophical and ethical challenge, as well as a scientific and technological one.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
I think we should dive into those ethical challenges next time.
Okay, sounds good.
I'm really fascinated to hear what the sources have to say about that.
Yeah, it's some pretty thought-provoking stuff.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for today,
Okay,
but we'll pick up right where we left off next time.
looking forward to it.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone. It's definitely a theme that runs through a lot of what we're looking at.
Yeah, like terraforming Mars is more than just like a science problem.
Exactly. There's a whole ethical side to it, too.
Yeah. So let's talk about those ethical challenges.
Okay, sure.
What are like some of the biggest concerns that the sources bring up?
Well, one big concern is the possibility of unintended consequences.
Unintended consequences, like what?
Well, we've talked about the possibility of harming microbial life on Mars, even if we don't find it first.
Right, right.
But there are other things we don't know, too.
Like what?
Well, for example, we don't really know how terraforming would affect Mars's geology
Well,
or its climate in the long term.
right.
We could like accidentally trigger processes that we can't control.
And that could be bad.
Yeah, it could lead to like really unpredictable outcomes.
So it's kind of like playing planetary roulette.
Kinda.
Like we spin the wheel and hope for the best.
Right, but we don't really know what's going to happen.
And the stakes are pretty high.
They are, yeah. I mean, we're talking about a whole planet here.
And potentially other life forms.
Exactly.
It really makes you think about whether we have the right to take those kinds of risks.
It's a valid question.
It is.
And it's one that we have to think about carefully.
Absolutely. And, another ethical angle that I found really interesting
Yeah.
is the question of who gets to decide how Mars is governed.
Right. If we make it habitable, who gets to live there?
Exactly. Would it just become another, like, land grab?
Yeah. Would it be like a continuation of colonialism?
Right. With countries competing for resources and territory.
It's a real concern.
It is.
I mean, we have a history of that on Earth.
Yeah, we do.
So we have to be careful not to repeat those same mistakes.
But it could also be an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Like to create a more just and equitable society.
Oh, absolutely.
One that learns from the mistakes we've made on Earth.
Yeah, we could rethink our social and political systems.
Maybe even design them from scratch.
It's a really exciting possibility.
It is. It's like we have this blank slate.
Yeah. This chance to build something truly new.
A new world.
Yeah, a new world based on different principles.
Like sustainability and cooperation.
Yeah, and respect for all forms of life.
That's the dream, right?
It is, but it also requires us to be honest with ourselves.
About what?
About our own history and our capacity for both good and bad.
Absolutely. We have to be realistic about human nature.
Yeah. I mean, this whole conversation has really made me think about terraforming.
Yeah.
Not just as a physical transformation,
Right.
but as a reflection of humanity's values.
Yeah, it's like holding a mirror up to ourselves.
Asking like, who are we?
Exactly.
What kind of future do we want?
It's a really profound question.
It is, and I think it's one that everyone has to answer for themselves.
Yeah, there are no easy answers here.
No, but I think by having these conversations, by weighing the pros and cons and thinking about the ethics of it all,
we can at least start to move in the right direction.
yeah, we can start to shape a more thoughtful approach to our future in space.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing how we went from how do we do this to should we do this so quickly.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the point though, right? Like
Yeah.
we really shouldn't just jump into these big projects without thinking about what could happen.
Yeah, for sure. It's like the sources are telling us to slow down,
Mm-hmm.
to really consider the consequences before we start messing with a whole planet.
It's a big decision, yeah.
It is. So let's actually talk about those ethical challenges.
Okay, yeah.
What are like some of the biggest concerns that the sources bring up?
Well, one of the main things they talk about is the risk of unintended consequences.
Right. We touched on that a little bit earlier.
Yeah, like the possibility of harming Martian life, even if we haven't found it yet.
But what else? Like what other things could go wrong?
Well, we don't fully understand how terraforming would affect Mars in the long run.
Right.
Like its geology, its climate.
Okay.
We could set off some kind of chain reaction
It's a chain reaction. Okay.
that we can't control.
And that could be bad.
Yeah, it could have really unpredictable and potentially like catastrophic effects.
So it really is like playing planetary roulette.
Neither. Yeah.
Like we spin the wheel and hope for the best.
Right, but the stakes are incredibly high.
A whole planet.
Yeah.
And potentially other life forms.
Exactly.
And that really raises the question of of whether we have the right to take those risks,
It's a tough question.
It is.
It's one that we have to really wrestle with.
Yeah, and another ethical angle that
Yeah.
that I found really interesting
Yeah.
is the question of who gets to decide how Mars is governed.
Oh, right. Like if we make it habitable, who gets to live there?
Exactly.
And how do we make sure that it's fair?
Yeah, would it just become like another colony?
Another land grab?
Yeah, with countries fighting over resources.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a real possibility.
It is.
I mean, we've seen it happen before, right?
Yeah, we have.
So we have to learn from our past mistakes.
But it could also be an opportunity to do things differently, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like to create a truly just and equitable society.
Yeah.
One that doesn't repeat the same patterns of exploitation and inequality that we've seen on Earth.
Yeah, it could be a chance to build something better.
Yeah, like imagine a society that's based on cooperation,
Mhm.
on sustainability,
Yeah.
on respect for all life.
It's a beautiful vision.
It is, but it also requires us to be honest with ourselves
About what?
about our own flaws.
Our capacity for greed and selfishness.
Yeah, and our tendency to repeat the same mistakes over and over again.
It's not going to be easy.
No, it's not.
But I think it's a challenge worth taking on.
I agree. And this whole conversation about terraforming, it's really made me think about it not just as a physical transformation of a planet,
Right.
but as a kind of mirror.
A mirror.
Yeah, like reflecting back at us who we are as a species,
I like that.
what our values are, what our aspirations are.
It's a way of asking ourselves, like, what kind of future do we want to create?
Exactly. And I think that's a question that everyone has to answer for themselves.
Yeah, there's no one right answer.
No, but by having these conversations,
Mhm.
by thinking about the ethics, the risks, the possibilities,
Right.
we can start to figure out what that future might look like.
And hopefully make better choices.
Yeah, I mean, this whole deep dive has really left me with more questions than answers.
Yeah, me too.
But in a good way,
Absolutely.
It's made me even more curious about Mars, about space exploration, about the future of humanity.
It's a fascinating topic.
It really is.
Yeah.
So what's like the one thing you hope our listener takes away from this conversation about terraforming?
I think the most important thing is that even if we never actually terraform Mars,
Okay.
the journey itself is incredibly valuable.
The journey
Yeah, like the process of thinking about these questions.
of challenging our assumptions.
Of pushing the boundaries of what we think is possible.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
It's about expanding our horizons and ultimately about learning more about ourselves.
That's a great way to put it.
And who knows, maybe someday we'll actually get to see those Martian oceans.
Maybe. That'd be incredible.
It would.
Well, on that note, I think we've come to the end of our deep dive.
Yeah, I think so.
Thanks so much for guiding us through this really fascinating and thought-provoking topic.
It's been my pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
And until next time, keep looking up at the stars, keep asking those big questions, and keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
That's it for this episode of The Deep Dive.